the network is all about spinal cord injuries, to really look at what will make the difference to people with spinal cord injuries. At this point in time, we think there's a high mortality rate and people are poorly integrated into the community. We do realize though that in the burden of disease, it might be not so prevalent, but the impact of it on patients is quite severe, and a lot of the problems can actually be prevented.
By doing very basic interventions that don't need to be high-cost interventions, we can make a massive difference. As one of our mentors, Dr. Hans Frankel, always said, our aim is to get these people back to be active citizens and active taxpayers. If we can achieve that, with relatively little use of resources, both natural and financial resources, we've made a huge impact in the whole disease profile.
So for a continent of 1.2 billion people, there's probably somewhere between 40 and 80,000 new traumatic spinal cord injuries every year, and probably another 40 to 80,000 cases of paralysis every year related to tumors and diseases and infection. So 100,000 people per year or more could be affected across the African continent. And what we want to try to do is help define that, understand the scope of the problem, so we can help identify and prioritize resources to help.
When I got injured in 2012, all the main hospitals, the national hospitals in Tanzania was on strike. The doctors were on strike, so we didn't get treatment for like 18 days, 19 days. Yes, so during that period, I saw a lot of patients like me pass away. A lot of them, they come, they pass away, they come, they pass away.
These people actually, especially people with spinal cord injuries, they need a special attention. They need special attention in terms of transport, in terms of normal life at home, in terms of treatments in the hospitals, in terms of equipment they're using in the hospitals, even at home, in terms of economical issues, in terms of their partners. So they have been affected in all aspects of life.
First of all, many people do not have access to wheelchairs. Either they're too expensive, or they don't exist, or they are not appropriate. Wheelchairs, cushions are similar problems. And then when they go home, the roads are not accessible to them, the pavements are not accessible. In the house, there can be a lot of architectural barriers.
In 10, 50 buildings you enter, maybe only 2 of them are accessible to wheelchair people. We don't have good roads. The environment is not really conducive to us.
And in Canada and in many of the Western countries in the developed world, accessibility is almost taken for granted. And I think it is really important to provide that kind of accessibility and care for people with spinal cord injuries, so that they themselves can become integrated and become part of mainstream society and contribute to the economic development.
My goal, and sort of the goal of our network, has been to train people who have spinal cord injuries, who have been through those kind of experiences themselves, to provide counseling and role models to these newly injured people, to demonstrate to them sort of how they can integrate themselves back into society.
So that's very important, to build up the self-esteem of people with disabilities, to empower them, to make them believe that they can believe in themselves again. And that's why I believe that peer support is such a big component of what we are discussing here at the moment. Because developing role models and leaders with disabilities out in the field and at grassroots level is very important.
We need to have peer support. We need to have role models, and this was, in this organization I work in Sweden, make me interesting. So all rehabilitation places need to have people in wheelchair with previous injury working there to be as a role models, like a peer support.
If that person is in the wheelchair, if that person cannot walk again, but still is happy, is smiling, I can smile, I can move on. Since that time, I never gave up. That's why I've decided to work very hard to support my peers so that they can become role models in Africa.
AFSCIN actually from the beginning has been very much about bringing healthcare professionals, policymakers and people with spinal cord injury together in that platform. Spinal cord injury can happen to any of us. We can be walking around today, we may have a broken back, broken neck tomorrow, so we don't know what is around the corner for any of us. So therefore we also need to think about that, and we need to think, if we have an accident tomorrow, what would we like, what would we expect?
The same as all of us have challenges, people with physical disabilities have challenges as well, but can partake actively as members of society and of the world as a whole, and they have the same dreams and aspirations as all of us, and our function as healthcare professionals is to make that available holistically for them across the spectrum of life, from time of injury till they pass on to the next life.